Really? Did the Canadian government kill the hobby drone industry? Probably not, but they certainly came down with some really restrictive legal rules aimed directly at recreational drone users. Now, the country of Canada is vast, with some of the most scenic vistas on the planet. In essence, it is one of the better places in the world for photography buffs. And for me, this is why I enjoy photography so much. Everything in Canada is spread out over thousands of kilometers, and there are a heck of a lot of lakes and rivers. This means getting to locations to photograph is easier done with a drone. Now, some say that the Canadian government has made recreational drone users the scapegoats for everything that is negative about drone users. That is to say that it is only the recreational drone users who fly drones at airports, into cars, into people, into buildings, causing all sorts of damage. Now, the problem is that the Canadian government put out a set of laws that you could pretty much drive a semi-truck through. What's important here is not necessarily the law and trying to follow it to the letter, because you'll just end up confused. More so, what you should look for here is the spirit of the law. Every law, even if general in nature, has an intended purpose. This means that a reasonable person should be able to know the intent of the law and take action accordingly. Sure, hobbies are designed to be fun and enjoyable. So with these new laws, is it still going to be fun and enjoyable? Well, that's what this video is about. I'm going to review the laws and see how they impact me, a recreational drone photographer, and see if I can still have fun and enjoyment. Here we go. Now, recreational drones over 250 grams are subject to the new laws. Here I've lined up many of the popular drones used by recreational and commercial drone users today. Many of these are all, unfortunately, over 250 grams and are therefore subject to the new recreational drone laws. Even FPV race quads are subject to the new laws, so FPV pilots, beware. You'd have to have a really small FPV drone to not be subject to the new laws, like this little 150 quad or even this tiny little Inductrix. Here's a restriction that some people find a bit difficult to deal with because of where they live in the country. So this restriction says that you must fly your model aircraft, your drone, a minimum of 9 kilometers from the center of an aerodrome. So the 9-kilometer distance rule, do you really have to be 9 kilometers?
Hey buddy, I think you're outside the 9-kilometer rule.
Here I am trudging through the snow in the east end of Ottawa on a little island called Petrie Island. I've flown here many times over the years, mostly in the early mornings when no one is around, and I've captured some amazing footage. The only aircraft I have seen in this area have been flying at thousands of feet above me. So common sense dictates this is a safe place to fly a drone. And here's another restriction people are having a problem with already, so I'm going to read it off a piece of paper. Here's exactly what it says. It says, a person must not operate a model aircraft at a lateral distance of less than 250 feet, 75 meters from buildings, structures, vehicles, vessels, animals, and the public, including spectators, bystanders, or any person not associated with the operation of the aircraft. Now, if I lined up 10 people and asked them, what did I just read and what does that mean? I would get 10 different opinions and 10 different stories. So we could sit here all day and have discussions about, what's a building? Is it a shed or is it a skyscraper? What about a vehicle? Is it a car or is it a bicycle? What about an animal? Is it a squirrel or is it a horse or a cow? Anyways, what has to be taken into consideration is not exactly what things are, but what's the spirit of the restriction or the law. So I'm guessing that when they say buildings and vehicles and other stationary objects, they're talking about objects that don't belong to you, that you could damage. And if I damage somebody else's property with my drone, well then that's not going to make somebody else happy and we're going to have a problem. So pretty much I consider the spirit of the law to be anything that I could possibly damage that's not mine, I should take care and avoid. Okay, so what about people? Well, people are not structures. People are in continuous movement. One minute they're not there, and the next minute they are. So if you've been avoiding them by 250 feet, and next thing you know, people start running into your path, well, then you have a bit of a problem. So you really have to monitor where people are on the ground and take care to avoid them. And what about the restriction of staying 250 feet away from animals? I'm guessing that the person who wrote that has not been out of their office in a very long time, because if you live in Canada, everywhere you look, there's animals in the air or on the ground. And what exactly is an animal? How small, how big? So I'm guessing if you go by the spirit of the law, what the intention was not to cause undue harm or upset to animals. We all know that a drone sounds like a horde of bees, so some animals can be really freaked out if you fly a drone close to them. So the pilot should take care not to fly too close to animals to cause any sort of harm or upset. Okay, so there's a height restriction as well. A person shall not fly their model aircraft, a drone, higher than 300 feet, 90 meters AGL. Now, many developed countries allow drones to be flown, or model aircraft to be flown at 400 feet. That's their maximum height. In Canada, we have 300 feet. My guess is the Canadian government stuck with 300 feet because it's a restriction that you can't enforce. There's no way someone's going to get a measuring tape from the ground to the air and say you're above a certain height. So if the Canadian government would have placed it at 400 feet, they all know, just like the speed limit on a highway, if you say you can only go this fast, people are going to go faster than what it says. So if you said you could go 400 feet, well, then I'm guessing people in Canada would go 500 or 600 feet. So if they leave it at 300, at least they've set a limit, and they know people might go above it, but they're hoping everybody stays at the 300. This is the view looking straight down from 30 meters, 100 feet. And this is what the scenery looks like at 30 meters, 100 feet. This is the view looking straight down from 60 meters, 200 feet. And this is what the scenery looks like at 60 meters, 200 feet. Finally, this is the view looking straight down from the maximum height limit of 90 meters, which is 300 feet. And this is what the scenery looks like at 90 meters, 300 feet. I can honestly say, for me, as a recreational drone user, 90 meters, 300 feet, it's an acceptable height. Now, there's even a restriction on distance. So the law says that no person shall operate a model aircraft, a drone, at a distance, a lateral distance of 500 meters, which I believe is about 1,640 feet. So the reason for that is obviously so that you could keep it in view. In Canada, we have a restriction that says no flying at night. You must always keep your drone in view. Now you're saying, whoa, what was that part about no flying at night? I can fly in the daytime, but I can't fly at night. My drone has indicator lights on it. It's a very advanced drone with object avoidance and whatnot. Well, it's not so much that your drone has indicator lights and that you can see it. The problem is all those other objects that don't have any lights on them. There's a good chance you're going to bump into something in the night, and the government doesn't want you to do that, which I think is pretty wise. And I know some of you are thinking, why 500 meters? That's my maximum distance I can fly away from me. My drone can do 7 kilometers. Well, that may be true, but 500 is the maximum distance. Can it be enforced? It'd be kind of hard to enforce it, but let's use some common sense here. Say you're flying your drone and you're quite a distance away and you're not very high off the ground. You can't see what's going on around you. You can only see forward. So if animals come running out from the side or people come running out from the side, you really can't see what's going on to take evasive action. Now, if you're flying higher in the sky, same problem. What if a plane comes out from some direction and you're just looking forward through your camera? You can't take evasive action. And how many times have we all, as in this video, this has happened to me, been flying in one direction and then a flock of birds come flying out from another direction? So it's always good to have a visual reference of where your drone is so you can take evasive action. So the 500 meters, it's logical. Another new law for drones is distance. So I'm going to fly out, you're only allowed to go 500 meters, which is half a kilometer. So I'm going to take this drone and I'm going to fly it out 500 meters. It's really far, 500 meters. Let me show you what I look like from 500 meters away. Okay, this last restriction that I'm going to read out is one I take great exception to. So here, let me read it so I don't get anything wrong. It says, the owner of a model aircraft shall not operate or permit a person to operate the aircraft unless the name, address, and telephone number of the owner is clearly made visible on the aircraft. Clearly made visible. Well, there's an awful lot of uneducated people out there who still believe that if you fly a drone, even though it's a hobby, then you must be a pervert because that camera on that drone is just there to spy on them. Anytime certain people see a drone in the air, they think the camera on that drone is looking at them and there's some telephoto on it and following them around. So all these uneducated and maybe unbalanced people in the world do not need to visibly see my name and address and phone number on a drone. So that's never going to happen. So one thing I've been doing for the last 2 years is I put my phone number on a drone. That way if it gets stuck in a tree in the forest someplace and somebody finds it months later, they can just call and there'll always be a finder's fee. So there you have it. There's the bulk of the new restrictions and laws in Canada for recreational drone users. Are they necessary? Definitely. Do I think they're all perfect? Far from it. And I'll tell you, there's only 3 of them that I really don't care for, and here's the 3. So the first one I have a problem with is that 9-kilometer distance from the center of an airport. The problem is in Canada, Canada's vast. We have all types of airports. We have international airports, we have little commuter airports, and then we have little private airports. Well, each of those has different sized planes at each airport. So in Canada, I would say, since we're only allowed to fly at a height limit of 300 feet, that the international airports, sure, leave the rules and the law that you have to be 9 kilometers away. The smaller airports, reduce it to 5 kilometers, because I might live in an area where the only airport around is some little farmer's field and I got to stay 9 kilometers from that, and old Buckeye Jim only flies on Sundays, yet the law says I got to stay 9 kilometers away. It's ridiculous. So the Canadian government should rethink that and make international airports, leave them at 9 and all other airports at 5 kilometers. The next one I have a problem with is the 250 feet that one must remain away from buildings, vehicles, and people and animals. Well, it's unfortunate in many ways that the government thinks that buildings and people are the same thing. Buildings and vehicles, for the most part, are stationary. So I would conclude that a stationary object, I should be no closer than 100 feet away. And for a moving object, like people, moving vehicles on roads, those I should be 250 feet away from, because if they're moving, they can come towards me or away from me. But stationary objects just stay stationary, and 100 feet I think is applicable. So government, please reconsider that one. Change your law so that for people and moving objects, 250 feet, stationary objects, 100 feet. I'd be happy with that. And finally, you know which one I'm going to pick as number 3. Yeah, that whole address thing, putting it visibly on your drone. Just think, in the world, anytime there's a cyber attack on a company where our personal information is stored, we freak when that information is compromised. So why should I just throw the information out in plain sight on my drone? Privacy Acts, all sorts of issues at stake here. So government, that one you might want to rethink. Go with something like the United States, where you can register your drone and get a little identification number, or just leave it as I've been doing for the last 2 years. Leave just your phone number on the drone. That's fine. So there you go. Those are the laws and restrictions in Canada for recreational drone users. What do you think? Too restrictive? A little too crazy? Or do you think it's just right? Or do you think it should be even more restrictive and the laws should be maybe a bit more harsh? If so, whatever you think, leave a comment below and let me know. Once again, this video is just my opinion, so everybody else has an opinion, and I welcome your thoughts below. Also, since my videos are viewed all over the world, in your countries, what are the restrictions there? Is it pretty harsh or is it pretty lax? By all means, leave a comment below and let us know your country and exactly what the restrictions are. It'd be quite informative for everybody who views these videos. Anyways, until next time, for now, enjoy the hobby and fly safe.